A new beginning. Imagine your world falling apart, shattered by betrayal. You're alone, broke, with a baby in your arms and nowhere to go. What if, in your darkest moment, a complete stranger offered you not just a helping hand, but a chance at a whole new life? Could you trust it? Could you believe in a second chance at happiness? Get ready for an emotional journey. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and be part of our community. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more uplifting stories. Sometimes when all seems lost, life surprises us with a new beginning. Sarah held her phone with trembling hands, checking for the 10th time the messages she'd found on David's phone. Her heart hammered in her chest as the words echoed in her mind. "I love you, my darling. Can't wait to be together forever." Leo slept peacefully in his crib beside the bed, oblivious to the unfolding drama. At 7 months old, he was the only light in Sarah's life lately. Unemployed since her illness, she depended entirely on David to survive. The door opened, and David walked in, shaking his wet umbrella. At 32, he still had the charm that had won her over 2 years ago, but now Sarah saw beyond the facade. "My love, how was your day?" he asked, kissing her forehead mechanically. Sarah took a deep breath. "David, we need to talk." He frowned. "About what?" "I'm tired, Sarah. It was a tough day at work." "I saw the messages." Her voice came out firmer than she expected. David's face paled. For a moment, the silence was broken only by the sound of the rain and Leo's soft breathing. "What messages?" He tried to feign ignorance. "Don't treat me like an idiot." "David!" Sarah stood up from the bed, showing him her phone. "Clara isn't just a co-worker. How long have you been together?" David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Sarah, I can explain." "Explain what? That you cheated on me? That you plan to be with her forever while I take care of your son?" "It wasn't planned. These things happen." "Happen?" Sarah felt tears welling up. "I got pregnant, David. I quit my job because you said you'd take care of us. I trusted you." "Listen, Sarah, I wasn't ready to be a father. You know that. Clara, she understands me." "And Leo? Is he not your son?" David looked towards the crib with an empty expression. "Look, I'll help financially when I can, but I can't pretend we're a happy family. It's not fair to me, or to you." "Not fair to me?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "You're abandoning me, David, abandoning your son." "You'll manage. You've always been strong." He started collecting his clothes from the wardrobe. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to live with Clara. I've already spoken to the landlord. You have until the end of the month to move out of the apartment." Sarah felt the ground collapse beneath her feet. "You can't do that. I have nowhere to go." "Go back to your parents' house. With what face? You know they never approved of our relationship. They said you weren't right for me, and I defended you." David closed his bag without looking at her. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but I can't live this lie anymore." "Lie?" Sarah blocked the door. "Is our son a lie? We're 2 years together, a lie?" "Get out of the way, Sarah. Don't make this harder than it already is." "Harder for whom? For you?" Tears streamed freely down her face. "You're destroying our family." David gently pushed her aside. "We're not a family, Sarah. We never truly were." The words cut like a knife. Sarah watched in shock as the man she loved carried his bag to the door. "David, please," she whispered. He stopped at the door without turning around. "I'm sorry. I really am." The door closed and Sarah collapsed to the floor. Leo woke with the noise and began to cry. She stood up shakily, picked up her son, and hugged him to her chest. "Mummy's here, my love," she murmured through tears. "Mummy will always be here." But as she looked around the apartment she would soon lose, Sarah wondered how she would keep that promise. Unemployed, penniless, homeless, she was completely alone in the world with a 7-month-old baby. Leo's cries echoed her own tears, as if he understood that their lives had just changed forever. 3 days had passed since David left, taking with him not only his clothes, but also any vestige of hope Sarah still harbored. The apartment seemed smaller now, suffocating, as if the walls were closing in on her and Leo with each passing hour. Sarah sat on the living room floor, surrounded by overdue bills scattered like cards from a cruel game. The electricity bill, the gas, the rent, red numbers that seemed to scream her inadequacy as a mother, as a woman, as a human being. Her savings, already scarce, had been depleted buying nappies and formula. Leo crawled across the worn rug, exploring the world with the innocent curiosity of his 7 months. Every now and then, he would look at his mother and smile, a toothless grin that broke Sarah's heart. How could she explain to a baby that the world she had built for him was crumbling? The phone rang, making her jump. For a crazy moment, her heart raced. Could it be David? Maybe he had realized his mistake. Maybe. "Sarah, it's your mother." Mrs. Miller's voice echoed through the silent apartment. Sarah closed her eyes, taking a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Mom. How are you?" "I'm fine, dear. Your father and I were talking about you two. We haven't heard from you in 2 weeks. How's Leo? And David?" Sarah felt her throat tighten. How could she tell them David had left? How could she admit that all her parents' warnings had been right? "Leo's growing so much, smarter every day." Her voice trembled slightly. "And David? He's working a lot. Important projects." "That's good, dear. I hope he's being a good father. You know your father always had his doubts about him, but if you chose him, we respected it." The words were like a stab. Sarah remembered the last argument with her parents, 6 months earlier, when they suggested she move back home during her illness. "He won't take responsibility," her father had said. "Men like him never do." "You don't know David," she had responded defensively. "He loves me. He loves our son." Now the words echoed in her mind like a cruel prophecy. "Mom," she began, her voice faltering. "If I ever need—" "What, dear?" Sarah swallowed the words. She couldn't do it. Not yet. "Nothing, just, it's good to know you're there. Always, my child. Always." After she hung up, Sarah felt even more isolated. The apartment seemed to echo her own voice, and the silence was broken only by Leo's happy sounds as he played. The afternoon dragged on in a hopeless lethargy. Sarah tried to organize the bills, to make a plan, but every scenario she imagined ended the same way. She and Leo on the street, with nowhere to go. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in orange hues that contrasted cruelly with her gloomy mood, she couldn't stand being within those walls anymore. She dressed Leo in warm clothes, a yellow romper David had bought, which now seemed like a bitter irony, and went out with him in her arms. The evening was cold and damp, with that fine, typical October drizzle that penetrates clothes and bones. Sarah walked the neighborhood streets aimlessly, just needing to move, to breathe, to feel that she still existed outside that apartment that had become a prison. The streetlights created golden halos in the drizzle, and the few people passing by walked quickly, protected by umbrellas and heavy coats. Sarah pulled Leo's hood up, making sure he was warm, but she herself shivered in her thin coat, which was all she had. The more she walked, the heavier her thoughts became. How would she get a job carrying a baby? Who would hire her? Even if she found work, who would look after Leo? She had no money for nursery, no close relatives besides her parents, and the idea of going back to their house with her son in her arms, admitting they were right about David, seemed impossible to bear. Tears began to flow, mixing with the drizzle on her face. First they came slowly, then in torrents she could no longer control. She stopped under a streetlight, at a point where the pavement widened, and collapsed. "I can't," she whispered to Leo, who watched her with his big, dark eyes. "I don't know how I'll take care of you. I don't know what to do." It was then that she felt the baby stir in her arms. Leo raised a small hand and touched her wet face, as if trying to understand why Mummy was sad. The simple, pure gesture made Sarah cry even more. "I'm sorry, my love," she sobbed. "Mummy's confused, but it'll be okay. We'll find a way. I don't know how, but we will." The sound of an engine slowing down made her look up. A dark car had stopped in the street, and she saw the window rolling down slowly. "Excuse me for bothering you," a masculine voice said, gentle but concerned. "Are you all right?" Sarah quickly wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. Through the window, she saw a serious-looking man with kind eyes. I'm fine. Thank you," she said, though her voice was clearly choked. The man studied her for a moment, and then turned off the engine. She heard the car door opening, and him getting out. He was tall, around 30, with neatly cut brown hair and wearing a dark overcoat that looked expensive. There was something in his posture that conveyed authority, but also genuine kindness. "Forgive my persistence," he said, approaching slowly. "But a mother with a crying baby alone in the rain is not something I can simply ignore." Sarah watched him carefully. In other circumstances, she would never speak to a stranger on the street, especially carrying Leo. But there was something in his voice, a sincerity that seemed real. "My name is James Miller," he continued, maintaining a respectful distance. "And it looks like you're going through a very difficult time. Can I help in any way?" The simple kindness in his voice was too much for Sarah's already fragile defenses. The words came out before she could think better. "My boyfriend, my son's father. He left me, left us." Her voice failed. "I don't have a job. I don't have money. I'm going to be evicted." James was silent for a moment, and Sarah feared she had shared too much with a complete stranger. But when he spoke again, his voice was even gentler. "How about we get out of this drizzle? There's a diner just around the corner. You could have something hot, and your baby would be more comfortable." Sarah hesitated. All the warnings about talking to strangers echoed in her mind. But when she looked at Leo, she saw that he too was starting to feel cold, even protected in her arms. "I don't know if I should." "I perfectly understand your caution," James said. "But look, you're on the street with a baby in the cold and rain. At least let me offer a warm place for you to sit for a few minutes. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, you can leave, no questions asked." Leo chose that moment to whimper, a small, delicate sound that made Sarah's heart ache. The decision was made by maternal instinct. "Just for a few minutes," she said. James smiled for the first time, a smile that completely transformed his serious face. "Of course, I'll get the car." The Grandma's Corner Diner was exactly the kind of place Sarah used to avoid in the days when she had money to choose where to eat. Small, with worn formica tables and plastic chairs, but there was something cozy about the simple decor and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee that permeated the air. James chose a table in the most secluded spot, away from the few customers who still remained at that hour of the night. He helped Sarah get settled, and she noticed how naturally he moved, unhurriedly, as if he had all the time in the world for a stranger in crisis. "What would you like to drink?" asked the waitress, a middle-aged woman with a floral apron and a warm smile. "A coffee for me," James said. "And for the lady?" "A hot chocolate, please," Sarah murmured, adjusting Leo in her lap. The baby had stopped crying and was now curiously observing the new environment, his dark eyes taking in the diner's soft lights. "And maybe some biscuits?" James suggested. "To go with it." Sarah was about to protest. She didn't have money to pay for even a biscuit, but James was already waving to the waitress. "You can bring a selection, please." When they were alone, a comfortable silence settled between them. Sarah took the opportunity to observe the man who had stopped to help her. James had strong features, but they were kind. A well-trimmed beard that gave him a mature look. And when he smiled, as he had a few moments before, his eyes lit up in a way that made her feel that perhaps the world wasn't a completely hostile place. "What's your son's name?" he asked, observing Leo with genuine interest. "Leo. He's 7 months old." "That's a nice, strong name." James extended a finger to Leo, who immediately grabbed it with his small hands. "Hello, Leo. Nice to meet you." The simplicity of the interaction made something stir in Sarah's chest. David had rarely shown this kind of natural interest in his son. The waitress brought the drinks and a plate of assorted biscuits. The hot chocolate was perfect, sweet and creamy, and Sarah realized she hadn't eaten anything substantial since breakfast. She took a biscuit hesitantly, and the taste of sugar and cinnamon almost made her cry again. Not from sadness, but from a simple relief she hadn't experienced in days. "Now," James said, stirring the sugar in his coffee, "if you want to talk about what happened, I'm a good listener. If you don't, we can just sit here until you feel better." There was something in the way he said it that made Sarah's defenses crumble completely. Perhaps it was the emotional exhaustion of the past few days, or perhaps it was the desperate need for someone to simply listen to her without judging. But she heard herself beginning to speak. "My name is Sarah Davies," she began, her voice low, "and I was very stupid." "I doubt that," James said softly, "but go on." The words came out slowly at first, then in a torrent she couldn't control. She talked about how she met David at a friend's party 2 years ago, how he seemed different from the other men she had met, more mature, more confident. She told him about the intense relationship they developed, about how she moved into his apartment after 6 months together. "I worked as a sales assistant at a clothes shop downtown," she explained, taking small sips of hot chocolate. "I didn't earn much, but I was independent. I had my own plans, my own dreams." "What kind of dreams?" James asked, genuinely interested. "Silly things," she said, blushing slightly. "I wanted to have my own shop, a little boutique. I was always good with people. I knew how to help them find what looked best on them. I was good at what I did." "That doesn't sound silly to me. It sounds like ambition and talent." Sarah looked at him, surprised. David used to ridicule her plans, calling them girly dreams. James's simple validation caught her off guard. She continued her story, talking about the unplanned pregnancy, about how David was initially shocked, but then seemed to have accepted it, how he convinced her to quit her job. "I'll take care of you," she repeated his words bitterly. "You don't need to worry about anything." And I believed him. I gave up my job, my independence, everything. Leo began to get restless, and Sarah automatically started rocking him gently. James observed the interaction carefully. "You're a good mother," he said simply. "I don't feel that way. A good mother would have a stable home to offer her child. A good mother wouldn't be crying on the street in the cold. A good mother does what she can with what she has. And from what I see, you're doing exactly that." Sarah felt tears threatening to well up again, but this time they weren't just from sadness. She continued her story, reaching the events of the past few days, the discovery of the betrayal, David's departure, the eviction notice. left us," she finished, her voice almost a whisper, as if we never existed to him, as if Leo was just an inconvenience. James was silent for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. When he finally spoke, his voice was laden with an emotion Sarah couldn't quite identify. "Do you have children?" she asked. James hesitated. "No, but let's just say I understand the importance of having stable figures in a child's life." They were silent again, and Sarah realized she felt better than she had in days. Not fixed. Her problems were still there, immense and seemingly insoluble. But heard. Understood. "Sarah," James finally said, "can I ask a question that might seem strange?" She nodded. "Would you be willing to hear a proposal? A possibility that could solve, at least temporarily, your housing and employment situation?" Sarah's heart raced. What kind of proposal? James took a deep breath, as if making an important decision. "I live alone in a house that's too big for one person. Recently, my housekeeper retired after 15 years working for me. I need someone to help with the house maintenance, cleaning, organization, preparing some meals occasionally." He paused. "You would have a place to live, a decent salary, and you could look after Leo at the same time?" Sarah was speechless. Of all the things she expected that night, a job offer from a complete stranger was definitely not on the list. "But you don't even know me. How can you offer that?" "It's true. I don't know you well. But I know you're a dedicated mother who finds herself in a desperate situation due to circumstances beyond her control. I know you had a job before and were responsible enough to keep it, and..." He hesitated. "Honestly, my house is very quiet. Perhaps a little life is exactly what it needs." "That's crazy," Sarah murmured. "Perhaps, but sometimes madness is the only sensible thing to do." James took out his wallet from his pocket and handed it to her. A business card. James Carter, architect. His number and office address were printed in elegant letters. "You can research me, check references. You don't need to decide now." Sarah looked at the elegant card. "And if I accept, what exactly would the conditions be?" "You would have your own room, and another room that would be perfect for Leo. Your responsibilities would be to keep the house organized and clean. It's not a mansion, but it's a good size. Perhaps prepare a meal when I can't cook. Nothing too complicated." He mentioned a salary that made Sarah's eyes widen. "That's more than I earned as a sales assistant. You'd be living in the house, available when needed." "It's fair." Sarah looked at Leo, who was asleep in her arms, completely oblivious to the conversation that was deciding his future. "Why would you do this? For a complete stranger?" James was silent for a long moment, looking out the diner's blurred window. "Why?" he finally said. "Everyone deserves a second chance, and because for a long time, I've been waiting for a reason for my house to feel like a real home." There was a melancholy in his words that made Sarah realize that perhaps she wasn't the only one there needing a fresh start. "I'd like to see the house," she said, surprising herself, "before deciding anything." James smiled, that smile that completely transformed his face. "Of course. How about tomorrow afternoon? Can I pick you up at 2 p.m.? They exchanged phone numbers, and as James paid the bill, ignoring Sarah's protests, she wondered if she was making the most sensible or most insane decision of her life. During the drive back to the apartment, with Leo sleeping peacefully in the back seat, and James driving in respectful silence, Sarah looked out the window and felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Perhaps, she thought, when you're at the bottom of the well, the only direction possible is up. Sarah woke the next morning with a strange feeling in her chest. For a few seconds, she forgot where she was and why her heart was beating so fast. Then, reality returned like a wave. David, the abandonment, James's impossible proposal. She sat up in bed, watching Leo sleep peacefully beside her. Sunlight filtered through the cheap curtains, illuminating the apartment that would soon no longer be theirs. In less than 2 weeks, they would be on the street, unless... She picked up James's business card from the bedside table. James Carter, architect. It was printed in elegant letters, along with an address in the city's affluent neighborhood. Sarah ran her finger over the quality paper, wondering if the night before had been real or just a desperate dream. The phone rang, making her jump. "Hello? Sarah, good morning, it's James." His voice sounded different on the phone, more formal, more distant. Sarah felt a pang of doubt. "Good morning. I hope you slept well. Are you still interested in seeing the house this afternoon?" Yes, I am." "Great. I'll pick you up at 2, as we agreed?" After hanging up, Sarah spent the whole morning nervous. She changed clothes 3 times, trying to find something presentable, but that didn't look like she was trying too hard. Her options were limited. Most of her good clothes had been sold in recent months to pay bills. Finally, she decided on dark jeans and a simple white blouse, the only one that wasn't faded or stained with Leo's milk. She tied her long brown hair in a low ponytail and applied just a touch of lip gloss. Leo was particularly restless, as if sensing his mother's agitation. She dressed him in his nicest romper, a light blue one that enhanced his dark eyes, and packed his bag with nappies, bottles, and everything else he might need. At precisely 2 o'clock, James's black car pulled up in front of the building. Sarah went downstairs with Leo in her arms, carrying the bag and the folded stroller. James got out to help her, wearing a gray polo shirt and smart trousers that made him look younger than the night before. "Punctual," he said, smiling. "I like that." "Always have been," Sarah replied, letting him put the stroller in the boot. During the drive, James kept the conversation light, pointing out interesting city landmarks and asking about Leo. Sarah noticed how carefully he drove, always checking if she and the baby were comfortable. As they moved away from the city center and entered increasingly elegant neighborhoods, Sarah felt her nervousness grow. The houses became larger, the gardens more elaborate, and she began to question if she really belonged in that world. "We're here," James announced, turning into a tree-lined street, where houses were hidden behind tall walls and imposing gates. He stopped in front of a wrought iron gate, inserted a card into a reader, and the gates opened silently. What Sarah saw made her gasp. The house wasn't exactly a mansion, but it was far from modest. It was a 2-story contemporary-style building with large glass windows and impeccably maintained gardens. A small but elegant fountain adorned the circular driveway. "My goodness," she murmured, unable to hide her astonishment. "It's huge." "Too big for one person," James said, standing near the main entrance. "I bought it thinking about a different life than the one I ended up having." There was a melancholy in his voice that made Sarah look at him with curiosity, but he was already getting out of the car. The front door was solid wood, with frosted glass details. James opened it and gestured for her to enter first. The entrance hall took Sarah's breath away. The high ceiling, the cream marble floor, the curved staircase leading to the second floor, everything exuded elegance without being ostentatious. Natural light flooded the space through a skylight in the ceiling. "It's beautiful," she managed to say. "Thank you. I designed it myself." James seemed genuinely pleased with the compliment. "How about we start downstairs?" They walked through the house slowly. The living room was spacious and comfortable, with sofas in neutral tones and a stone fireplace. The dining room could easily seat 12 people. The kitchen was any homemaker's dream, modern, functional, with a central island and state-of-the-art appliances. "I don't cook very well," James admitted, running his hand over the granite countertop. "Mrs. Baker, my former housekeeper, tried to teach me for years, but I never had the patience." "I can cook," Sarah said shyly. "My mother always said a woman needs to know her way around the kitchen." "Another point in your favor?" There was also a study with shelves full of architecture books, a more intimate TV room, and a powder room. Everything was impeccably clean and organized, but Sarah noticed there was something cold about the atmosphere, as if the house were more a showroom than a home. "Now the second floor," James said, starting up the stairs. The upper floor had 4 bedrooms. The master bedroom was a spacious suite with a walk-in wardrobe and private bathroom. The other 3 bedrooms were smaller, but still larger than Sarah's apartment living room. "This would be your room," James said, opening the door to one of the bedrooms. "It has its own bathroom and a beautiful view of the garden." The room was perfect, large, bright, with a double bed, an armchair by the window, and a built-in wardrobe. Sarah imagined her few clothes lost in that immense space. "And this one?" James opened the door to the room next door. "This would be ideal for Leo." It was smaller than the other, but it had something special. Light entered softly through light curtains, and there was something about the layout of the space that immediately evoked tranquility. Sarah could visualize Leo's crib there, his toys organized, a little corner for feeding. "What do you think?" James asked. "It's perfect," she whispered, and then realized she had spoken aloud. "I mean, it's very beautiful." Leo, who had been quiet throughout the visit, chose that moment to start crying. Sarah immediately began rocking him, trying to calm him. "He must be hungry," she said, slightly embarrassed. "No problem. The kitchen is at your disposal, or, if you prefer, there's a comfortable chair in the living room." "The kitchen is fine." Back downstairs, James showed her where the utensils were and helped Sarah prepare the milk. She sat on the kitchen island and began feeding Leo, who immediately calmed down. "He's very good," James observed, watching the scene. "Normally, yes. I think he also sensed the change in atmosphere." "And you? What did you feel?" Sarah looked around the kitchen, then at James. "Honestly, it's intimidating. It's more beautiful than any place I've ever lived. I don't know if what? If I know how to take care of a place like this." James approached and leaned against the counter in front of her. "Sarah, this house may be beautiful, but it's not a home. I've lived here alone for 2 years, and it never truly felt alive. Last night, after I dropped you off, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I heard laughter within these walls." His words touched something deep in Sarah. She studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity, but found only honesty. "Are you sure about this? You won't regret having strangers living in your house?" "Not you two. You'd be strangers for long, and frankly, I think I need you more than you need me." Leo finished his bottle and immediately fell asleep in Sarah's arms. The simple domestic scene made something stir in James's chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why do you live alone? A man like you." "Like me?" "Successful, kind, with a beautiful house. You must have women lining up." James laughed, but there was no joy in the sound. "I was married 3 years ago. It didn't work out." "What happened?" He hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. "She wanted children. I wanted them too. We tried for 2 years, then we discovered the fault was mine. She decided our marriage no longer made sense." The raw confession made Sarah gasp. "I'm so sorry." "No need. It's in the past. But it explains why a house designed for a family never felt like a home." They were silent for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Sarah took a deep breath. "When can I start?" James smiled. The first genuine smile since they started talking about the past. "Whenever you want. Today, if it's convenient for you." "Today?" Sarah blinked, surprised. "Why wait? You said you have 2 weeks before the eviction. The sooner you move, the more time you'll have to get used to it." The practicality of the suggestion made sense, but Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. Would it be that easy? Just leave her old life and step into this new one? "Yes, I need to get our things. We don't have much, but can I help? There's a pickup truck at the office we can use." "You would?" "Sarah," James said, his voice becoming more serious. "If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. You're not just coming to work for me. You're bringing life to this house. It's a partnership." The word partnership resonated in Sarah's mind. Not an employee and employer. Partnership. Perhaps, she thought, looking at Leo sleeping peacefully in her arms, and then at James, who watched her with a hopeful expression. Perhaps this was exactly the second chance they both needed. The apartment Sarah had called home for the past 2 years seemed even smaller and more depressing when she saw it through James's eyes. He followed her up the narrow stairs of the old building, carrying Leo in his car seat, with a naturalness that surprised her. "Excuse the mess," she murmured, opening the door. "I wasn't expecting visitors." James entered the small apartment and looked around without making disparaging comments. Sarah watched his face, looking for signs of judgment, but found only a thoughtful expression. "You've managed to make this place a home," he finally told her. "That says a lot about you." It was true. Despite the financial limitations, Sarah had decorated the space with care. Colorful cushions on the worn sofa, small plants on the windowsills, framed photos on the makeshift table. There was love in those details, though now everything seemed stained by the sadness of the past few days. "I don't have much to take," she said, beginning to take clothes from the wardrobe and put them into 2 old suitcases. Most of the furniture came with the apartment. James put the car seat on the sofa and began to help, folding Leo's clothes with a care that touched Sarah's heart. There was something incongruous, yet touching, about seeing that elegant man handling baby rompers and onesies. "He has a lot of clothes," James observed, smiling at a particularly small item. "The only thing David always made sure to buy. He said his son had to be always well-dressed." The bitterness in Sarah's voice was undeniable. Well, at least in that, he got it right. As they packed, Sarah found things she had forgotten. A photo of her with David at the beginning of their relationship, when they were still happy. For a moment she hesitated before throwing it in the bin. "Aren't you taking it?" James asked, noticing her hesitation. "Why? To remember how stupid I was? To remember that you were capable of loving completely. That's not stupidity, Sarah. It's courage." She stared at him, surprised by the perspective. "Didn't you take anything from your ex-wife?" James stopped folding a shirt and looked thoughtful. "I did. A photo of us on our wedding day. Not because I miss her, but because that day represented hope. And hope should never be discarded, even when things don't go as planned." Sarah put the photo in the box. The packing process revealed how much her life had shrunk in recent months. 2 boxes of clothes, 1 box with Leo's things, a few books, toiletries, and little else. It was depressing to realize that 2 years of life fit in the boot of a car. "Is that it?" James asked when they finished. "That's it." Sarah looked around the empty apartment, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. "We weren't much for accumulating things. Sometimes less is more. You'll have space to build something new." During the drive back, Leo slept peacefully in the back seat, while Sarah watched the city pass by the window. She was leaving behind not just an apartment, but a whole life. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. "Nervous?" James asked, noticing how she fidgeted with her hands. "Terrified," she admitted. "It's a lot of change all at once. I understand. But you know you can change your mind at any time, right? If you don't feel comfortable, if it doesn't work out, would you dismiss me? I would help you find an alternative. This isn't a prison, Sarah. It's an opportunity." Back at the house, James insisted on carrying the bags while Sarah carried Leo. Going up the elegant staircase towards what would be her new room, she felt as if she were entering a dream. "I'll let you settle in," James said, placing the bags in the room. "If you need anything, I'll be in the study." "Oh, and Sarah?" "Yes?" "Welcome to your new home." Alone in the room, Sarah sat on the bed and looked around. It was 3 times larger than the room she had shared with David, with a beautiful view of the garden. Leo cooed peacefully in his car seat, as if he was already used to the new environment. She began to unpack slowly, putting her clothes in the immense wardrobe where they seemed lost. Her few books looked ridiculous on the empty shelf. Her beauty products occupied just a corner of the dressing table. When she finished, she decided to set up Leo's room. James had mentioned that he had bought some basic things during the afternoon, and she found a new crib still in its box, a changing table, some soft toys, and even a musical mobile. "You didn't have to," she murmured, but she was touched by his thoughtfulness. Assembling the crib was more complicated than she expected. After 20 minutes of trying to interpret the confusing instructions, she heard a soft knock at the door. "Can I help?" James appeared at the entrance, having already changed out of his smart clothes into jeans and a casual t-shirt that made him look younger and more approachable. "I can do it," she said, frustrated with a piece that refused to fit. "I'm sure you can, but 2 people assemble faster than 1. They worked together in comfortable silence, and Sarah noticed how James had skilled hands and patience for manual tasks. In 15 minutes, the crib was assembled and in the perfect spot by the window. "Thank you," she said, "and thank you for buying all this. You didn't have to. I wanted Leo to feel at home from day 1. That simple thoughtfulness made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. "No one ever. David never cared about these things." "Then David was an idiot." James's frankness made her laugh through her tears. "You don't know me well, and you're already defending my son. I know you well enough, and yes, I'm already defending both of you." That night, Sarah prepared their first meal in the new kitchen. Nothing elaborate, just a simple chicken risotto her mother had taught her. But cooking in that beautiful kitchen with all the quality utensils was an almost magical experience. James appeared in the kitchen, attracted by the aroma. "Smells good," he said, watching her stir the risotto. "I hope you like it. I'm no chef, but I try. It's been a long time since I've had a home-cooked meal. Usually it's sandwiches or takeout." "In a kitchen like this," Sarah made a feigned expression of horror, "that's practically a crime." They filled the dining room, with Leo sleeping in his car seat next to the table. Conversation flowed naturally. James talked about his current projects. Sarah talked about her old dreams of having her own shop. "Why not resume those plans?" he asked. "You have a talent for dealing with people. That's clear. And now you'll have financial stability to think about the future." "I don't know. It seems too ambitious for someone in my situation." "Your situation has changed, Sarah. You're not the desperate woman I found crying in the street yesterday. You're a strong woman who's rebuilding her life." After dinner, as James insisted on helping with the dishes, Sarah realized how the dynamic between them was naturally collaborative. There was no employer-employee dynamic she expected. "James," she said as she dried a plate, "can I ask about your routine so I know how to organize mine?" "Of course. I wake up early, around 5:30. I have a simple breakfast. Toast, coffee, maybe a fruit. I leave for the office at 8 and usually come back between 6 and 7 in the evening. Sometimes I work later, especially when I have tight deadlines. And weekends? I usually stay home, read, work a little in the garden. Pretty monotonous life, to be honest. It doesn't have to be monotonous, Sarah said, without thinking, then blushed as she realized how it sounded. James smiled. I hope not. Later, as she bathed Leo in his bathroom, a small but perfectly equipped bathtub that James had also provided, Sarah reflected on how her life had changed in just 4 hours. Yesterday, she was desperate, without prospects, crying in the rain. Today, she was in a beautiful house, with a job, taking care of her son in a safe and welcoming environment. We did it, my love, she whispered to Leo as she dried him. Mummy found a safe place for us. Leo smiled, one of his toothless grins that melted Sarah's heart, as if he understood that their lives had taken a turn for the better. After putting Leo to sleep in the new crib, she prepared for her first night in the room that was now hers. Things still felt strange, temporary, but there was a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. A soft knock at the door made her turn. James was there with a cup of tea. Chamomile, he explained. I thought it might help you relax on your first night. The simple yet thoughtful gesture almost made her cry again. Thank you. You didn't have to. Stop saying I don't have to do things, he interrupted, smiling. I want to. It's good for me to. After he left, Sarah sat on the comfortable bed and drank the tea, listening to the soft sounds of Leo sleeping in the next room, and the comforting silence of the house. For the first time in a long time, she fell asleep without fear of what tomorrow would bring. 2 weeks had passed since Sarah and Leo moved into James's house, and a comfortable routine had settled between them. Sarah discovered that taking care of a large house wasn't as intimidating as she had imagined, especially when you had the right equipment and no one constantly making a mess. She woke up early, around 5:30, taking advantage of the quiet moments before Leo woke up to have coffee alone in the kitchen and plan her day. It was a luxury she hadn't had in months, time to herself, to think, to simply exist without the constant pressure of survival. James always came downstairs at 6 o'clock, punctual as a clock. In the first few days, he seemed surprised to find her already awake, as if he wasn't used to sharing the house's morning spaces. Good morning, she would say, already preparing coffee, exactly as she had discovered he liked it. Strong, no sugar, accompanied by 2 lightly toasted slices of bread. Good morning. You don't have to wake up so early for me, he would invariably reply, but Sarah noticed that he seemed to enjoy the morning company. I like this time. It's when the house is quietest. And it was true. There was something magical about those moments. The soft light coming through the large windows, the aroma of coffee spreading through the kitchen, the feeling that the day was full of possibilities. As the days passed, their morning conversations grew longer. James began to talk about the projects he was working on. A sustainable house for a young family, the renovation of a historic building in the city center. Sarah, in turn, shared her observations about the house. Small improvements she could make, recipes she wanted to try. You have an interesting eye, he said one morning as she suggested a reorganization of the living room. Have you ever thought about working with interior design? Sarah laughed, putting her empty cup in the sink. I don't have the training for that. Training can be acquired. Talent is innate. Comments like this were frequent, and Sarah was beginning to realize that James saw potentials in her that she didn't recognize herself. Leo was also adapting wonderfully to his new life. The baby, who used to be constantly irritated in the small, stuffy apartment, now spent hours exploring the spacious areas of the house. James had insisted on installing safety gates on all the stairs, and he had bought a playpen for the garden where Leo could play outdoors. "He's getting bigger," James observed one afternoon, finding Sarah playing with Leo in the living room. The baby had managed to sit up alone for the first time that week. "Growing so fast," Sarah agreed, catching Leo as he started to lean to the side. "Sometimes I'm afraid of missing the important moments." "Why would you miss them?" "I don't know. Afraid that all this is too temporary for me to fully enjoy." James sat on the floor beside them, something he did increasingly often. "Sarah, you need to stop expecting life to fall apart. Not everything is temporary." It was easy to say, but hard to believe. Sarah had learned the hard way that stability could be an illusion. A subtle but significant shift occurred at the end of the second week. James came home later than usual, clearly stressed by a problem at work. Sarah had prepared dinner, a beef stew with vegetables that filled the house with a comforting aroma. "Tough day?" she asked when she saw him serving a generous portion. "Impossible client. Wants a sustainable house, but doesn't want to pay for sustainable materials. Wants energy efficiency but won't accept solar panels because they're ugly." James massaged his temples. "Sometimes I wonder why I chose this profession. Because you're good at what you do, and because you care about things that matter." He looked at her in surprise. "How can you be so sure?" "By the way you designed this house. Every detail thought out to maximize natural light, cross-ventilation, rainwater harvesting. You didn't tell me these things, but I noticed them by observing." "You noticed all that?" Sarah blushed slightly. "I spent a lot of time exploring the house while Leo slept. It's impossible not to notice how everything was designed to be functional and beautiful at the same time." James was silent for a moment. Then he smiled, a different smile from the others, warmer, more personal. "Thank you. I needed to hear that today." It was the first time Sarah felt she had offered him something beyond domestic services. She had been useful in a way that went beyond cooking and cleaning. Weekends brought an even closer dynamic. James wasn't in the habit of leaving the house on weekends, preferring to work in the garden or read in his study. Sarah, initially, tried to keep her distance, thinking he needed privacy. "You don't need to hide on weekends," James said, finding her confined in the room with Leo. "This is your home too. I don't want to disturb your rest." "You don't disturb me. Actually," he hesitated, "the house gets very quiet when you're not around." From that day on, weekends became more integrated. James started helping with Leo, initially hesitantly, then with increasing naturalness. He would hold the baby while Sarah prepared meals. He'd make faces that made Leo giggle. He even changed a nappy once, an experience he narrated with comical drama during dinner. "I never thought something so small could produce something so impressive," he said, making Sarah laugh until tears came to her eyes. "Wait until he starts eating solid food. My goodness, it's worse." The ease with which they fell into this domestic pattern was simultaneously comforting and unsettling for Sarah. It was too easy to imagine that this was real, permanent. It was too easy to forget that James was her employer and she was his employee. One particular moment stuck in her memory. It was a Sunday morning, and she was making pancakes, a special recipe her grandmother had taught her. James appeared in the kitchen, hair disheveled from sleep, wearing only a t-shirt and pajama bottoms. There was something intimate about that image, in the naturalness with which he moved around the kitchen, getting juice from the fridge, stealing a piece of still warm pancake. "That's delicious," he said. And when Sarah turned to answer, she found him very close. So close, she could smell his soap, see the tiny lines around his eyes when he smiled. For a moment, neither of them moved. There was something in the air, a different tension, electrical. Then Leo started crying upstairs, breaking the moment. "I'll go," James said quickly, and left the kitchen before Sarah could answer. When he returned with Leo in his arms, singing a soft, improvised tune, Sarah felt something stir in her chest. Something dangerous. Something she shouldn't be feeling. James was becoming more than just a kind employer. He was becoming part of her life in a way she hadn't foreseen or prepared to deal with. And by the way he looked at her lately, with a new intensity, an attention that went beyond courtesy, Sarah suspected she wasn't the only one who felt that change. That night, sitting on the comfortable bed, listening to the familiar sounds of the house, she wondered if she was building something real or preparing for a new disappointment. But for the first time in a long time, the fear was no longer stronger than the hope. A month had passed since Sarah and Leo moved into James's house, and the routine had become almost perfect. Sarah felt more confident every day, and had even started seriously considering James's suggestions about resuming her professional dreams. It was a sunny Thursday in November, and James had left earlier for an important client meeting. Sarah took advantage of the quiet morning to do a deeper clean of the house, something that didn't need to be done frequently, but which she loved to do to keep everything perfect. Leo was in the playpen in the garden, happily babbling as he explored his colorful toys. At 8 months old, he was becoming more active and curious every day, and Sarah adored watching him discover the world around him. She decided to take advantage of his being entertained to clean the living room windows, those huge windows James had designed to maximize natural light. It was a job that required care, especially since some of the windows were very tall. Sarah got the aluminum ladder from the laundry room, positioned it carefully, and started working. The view of the garden from above was even more beautiful, and she could see Leo playing peacefully while she worked. She was on the 4th step of the ladder, cleaning a particularly high panel, when she heard Leo start to cry. It wasn't his usual fussy cry. It was a sharper cry of discomfort. She turned quickly to look out the window and saw that he had dropped a toy out of the playpen and was clearly frustrated. "I'm coming, my love," she called, trying to quickly finish that section of the window. That's when it happened. As she tried to descend quickly, Sarah missed her footing on the 3rd step. The ladder, which wasn't completely stable on the smooth marble floor, swayed violently. She tried to grab onto something, but her hands slipped on the wet glass. Everything happened in slow motion, and at the same time, very quickly. The ladder fell to one side, and Sarah fell hard, hitting her right shoulder first on the corner of the glass coffee table, before hitting the marble floor with an impact that echoed throughout the house. The pain was instantaneous and overwhelming. She tried to move, but a sharp stab in her right arm made her cry out. Something was definitely broken. Worse still, she felt a warm liquid running down her forehead. Blood. Leo, startled by the noise, started crying even louder outside. "Leo!" she tried to call, but her voice came out weak. Her head was spinning, and she knew she had hit it hard. She tried to get up, but the pain in her arm was unbearable, and the dizziness made her collapse again. Panic began to set in. Leo was alone in the garden. She was injured and couldn't move properly. Her phone was in the kitchen, out of reach. With great effort and groans of pain, she managed to crawl to where she could see Leo through the glass of the garden door. The baby was safe in the playpen, but crying desperately, as if he sensed that something was wrong. "It's okay, my love," she tried to say aloud, but she wasn't sure if he could hear her. "Mummy's here." But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. The blood continued to flow. Her arm was swelling visibly, and she felt nauseous, a clear sign that the blow to her head had been serious. She tried to get up again, using her left arm to support herself on the sofa, but her legs were weak and trembling. She managed to stand for a few seconds before collapsing again, this time onto the sofa. Time passed slowly. She didn't know exactly how long it had been when she heard the sound of James's car in the driveway. The relief was so great it almost made her faint. "Sarah!" his voice called from the entrance. "I'm home early. The meeting was canceled." She tried to answer, but her voice came out only as a low moan. "Sarah!" His voice grew closer, moving towards the kitchen. "Where are you? I can hear Leo crying outside." "Here," she managed to say, but still very faintly. She heard his footsteps approaching the living room, and then a cry of horror. "My God! Sarah!" James ran to her, his eyes wide at the sight of blood on her head and the strange way her arm was positioned. "What happened? How?" "The ladder," she murmured. "I fell from the ladder, Leo. Is Leo okay? He's in the garden." "Leo's safe. Don't worry about him now." James was already pulling his phone from his pocket. "I need to call an ambulance." "No," she tried to protest. "It's not that serious." "Sarah, you're bleeding from your head, and your arm is clearly broken. It is that serious." His voice was altered, laden with an urgency she had never heard before. As he spoke to emergency services, James knelt beside her on the sofa, taking a clean cloth from the table to gently press against the cut on her head. "They're coming," he said, putting down the phone. "Can you see me clearly? How many fingers are these?" He held up 3 fingers, but Sarah saw 4. "4?" she tried. His expression became even more worried. "Concussion," he murmured to himself. "James." She gripped his arm with her left hand. "What if it's serious? What if I can't take care of Leo anymore? What if—" "Stop!" he interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "Don't think about that now. You're going to be fine." But she could see the fear in his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly as he tried to keep her conscious and comfortable. Leo was still crying outside, and Sarah tried to get up again. "I need to take care of him." "You're not going anywhere. I'll take care of Leo after the ambulance arrives." The ambulance siren approached quickly, and James ran to open the gate and guide the paramedics. In a few minutes, the living room was filled with activity. People checking her vital signs, immobilizing her arm, cleaning the cut on her head. "We'll take her to the hospital for more detailed exams," explained one of the paramedics. "Possible simple fracture of the radius and mild concussion. Nothing that won't resolve, but she needs to be monitored." "I'm going with her," James said immediately. "And the baby?" asked the paramedic. "I can't leave Leo," Sarah said, trying to sit up on the stretcher. "Calm down," James said, gripping her hand. "I'll call my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. She's looked after children her whole life. She can be with him for a few hours." "But James?" James looked directly into her eyes and saw something there that made her stop protesting. It was more than concern. It was genuine fear, pure vulnerability. "Please, let me take care of both of you. Let me go with you." During the ride to the hospital, James held her left hand while the paramedics monitored her vital signs. She could see how tense he was, how he constantly looked at the monitors, how his breathing was irregular. "James," she said faintly, "are you all right?" He chuckled, but there was no humor in the sound. "I should be asking you that. I'm asking because you seem more scared than I am." James was silent for a moment, then squeezed her hand tighter. "When I saw you lying there in that living room with blood, for a moment I thought His voice failed. "I thought I might have lost you." The intensity in his voice, the raw emotion that shone through, made something stir in Sarah's chest. It wasn't just an employer's concern for an employee. It was something much deeper. "You're not going to lose me," she whispered. "It's not that easy to get rid of me." "I hope not," he said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "Because I don't know what I would do without both of you." It was the first time he had openly shown what he was feeling, and even through the pain and confusion of the concussion, Sarah understood that something fundamental had changed between them. The accident had forced both her and James to confront what they really meant to each other and what they had to lose. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and had that cold light that made everything seem more serious than it really was. Sarah lay on the emergency stretcher, with her right arm in a cast and a few stitches on her forehead, watching James pace like a caged animal. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor," she said, trying to ease the tension. "How can you joke at a time like this?" He stopped and faced her. "You could have died, Sarah, if you had hit your head at a different angle. But I didn't. I'm fine." "Fine?" James gestured towards the cast. "You've broken your arm, you have 5 stitches on your forehead, and you have a concussion. The doctor said it was all minor. I'll be fine in a few weeks." Dr. Green, the doctor who had attended to her, entered at that moment with the latest test results. "Well, Mrs. Davies, everything confirmed. Simple fracture of the radius. It will heal perfectly. The concussion is mild, but you need to be under observation for 24 hours. Will someone be able to stay with her at home?" "I will," James said immediately. "I'll take care of her." The doctor looked at him curiously. "Are you her husband?" "He's—" Sarah began, not knowing exactly how to define him. "I'm the most important person in her life," James said, with a conviction that made Sarah's heart race. "And she in mine?" Dr. Green smiled. "Understood. Well, then here are the instructions. No physical exertion for at least 2 weeks. The arm needs to be immobilized for 6 weeks. Pay close attention to signs of worsening concussion, excessive nausea, double vision, extreme drowsiness. If anything like that happens, bring her back immediately." James took the prescription and instructions as if they were documents of life or death. "And what about her baby? She's taking care of an 8-month-old child." "For now, no lifting anything heavy. She'll have to be looked after by other people until her arm gets better." Sarah felt panic starting to rise. "But I'm the only one here. I take care of him. He doesn't know anyone else. What if he cries all night? What if—" "Breathe," James said, holding her left hand. "We'll manage. Together." The drive home was silent. James drove with extreme care, as if she were made of glass. Sarah observed his tense profile and realized how deeply the accident had affected him. "James," she said softly, "are you all right?" He chuckled, but there was no humor in the sound. "I should be asking you that. I'm asking because you seem more scared than I am." James was silent for a moment, then squeezed her hand tighter. "When I got home and saw you in that state, for a moment, I felt as if the world had ended." "Why?" James stopped at a red light and turned to face her. "Because at some point, without me realizing it, you became the most important person in my life. You and Leo." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah felt her heart race, but also the familiar fear. "James, I know it's complicated. I know it started as a work relationship. I know you've been through a lot with David, but I can't pretend that what I feel for you is just friendship or gratitude." The traffic light turned green, but he didn't take his eyes off her. "The car behind is honking," she said nervously. James started driving again, but continued talking. "I'm sorry if this makes you uncomfortable. I'm sorry if I'm complicating things. But almost losing you today made me realize that I can't keep this to myself anymore." Sarah was silent during the rest of the journey, processing his words. Part of her wanted to say she felt the same way, that in the last few weeks, she had started to see him as much more than a kind employer. But the scared part, the part that still carried the scars from David, screamed to be careful. When they arrived home, Mrs. Jenkins, the 60-year-old neighbor who had been with Leo, greeted them at the door with the baby in her arms. "How is she?" the lady asked, looking worriedly at the cast and the stitches. "She'll be fine," James said. "Thank you for taking care of Leo. This little angel was no trouble. He had his milk, played a bit, and now he's starting to get sleepy." Leo, seeing Sarah, extended his arms towards her, making that happy sound that always melted her heart. "Hello, my love," she said, but when she tried to pick him up, the pain in her arm made her wince. "Leave him with me," James said, picking up Leo with increasing naturalness. "Hello, champ. Mummy's fine, but she needs to rest a bit." Seeing James with Leo always caused a strange feeling in Sarah's chest. The baby had gotten used to him in the last few weeks, and now he even smiled when he saw him. After Mrs. Jenkins left, James insisted that Sarah go upstairs to rest. "I need to prepare dinner," she protested. "You're not preparing anything. I'm ordering food. And Leo, will he need anything?" "I'll take care of Leo." "Sarah, you broke your arm today. Stop trying to do everything alone." "But you don't know how." "Then teach me. Teach me how to change a nappy properly, how to make a bottle, how to bath him. Teach me so I can really help you." There was something in his voice, a determination mixed with vulnerability that made Sarah stop protesting. "Okay," she said, "but it'll be complicated. You might struggle at first. We'll figure it out together." The next few hours were a mix of challenge and discovery. James proved to be a dedicated student, paying attention to every detail Sarah explained. When it was time to bath Leo, he was visibly nervous. "What if I drop him? What if I hurt him?" "You won't hurt him. Just hold him firmly and keep talking to him." Seeing James bath Leo, talking softly to the baby as he washed him with extreme care, was one of the most touching things Sarah had ever witnessed. Leo, in turn, seemed fascinated by the attention, smiling and clapping in the water. "I think he likes you," Sarah observed. "I hope so," James replied, "because I'm already crazy about him." After putting Leo to sleep, a task James performed with growing confidence, they sat in the living room, Sarah on the sofa, her arm supported by cushions, James in the armchair nearby. "Thank you," she said, "for everything today, for taking me to the hospital, for taking care of Leo, for... You don't need to thank me. It's what you do for the people you love." The word hung in the air. Love. "James, I know it's too early to talk about this. I know you need time. You have reasons to be cautious, but I'm not going to lie about what I feel." Sarah studied him. There was absolute sincerity in his eyes, an honesty she had never seen in David. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of trusting again, of believing that someone can truly stay, of letting Leo get attached, and then losing everything again." James got up and came to sit beside her on the sofa, careful not to hurt her. "Sarah, I'm not David. I'm not going to promise things I can't deliver, but I can promise this. As long as you want me to be part of your life, I'll be here. Not as your employer, not out of pity or charity, but because it's where I want to be. What if it doesn't work out? What if we find out we're too different? Then we'll figure that out together, honestly. But we're not going to let fear decide for us." Sarah really looked. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the way he had taken care of her and Leo today, how he was willing to learn, to adapt, to be part of her life in a real way. "I feel something for you too," she finally said, her voice almost a whisper. "I've felt it for weeks, but it scares me." "Why does it scare me?" "Because it's real. And when it's real, it hurts more when it ends." James took her left hand in his. "What if it doesn't end? What if it's the kind of thing that gets stronger over time?" "Do you really believe that?" "With you? Yes, I do." They were silent for a few moments, the weight of their mutual confessions filling the space between them. So, what do we do now? Sarah asked. Now, James said, adjusting Leo between them on the sofa. You rest and recover. And when you're better, we start figuring out how this works. No rush, no pressure, just being honest with each other. And Leo? Leo remains priority number one for both of us. The simplicity of the answer, the way he naturally included Leo in any future he imagined, was what finally convinced Sarah that perhaps this time she could risk her heart. Again, okay, she said. Let's try. The smile that lit up James's face was brighter than any light in the house. The 2 weeks following the accident completely transformed the dynamics of the house. Sarah, frustrated by not being able to do simple daily tasks with only one arm, had to accept help in a way she had never experienced before. Genuine, patient help, without demands or expectations. James had completely reorganized his schedule. He left later in the morning, came home at lunchtime to check on her, and arrived earlier in the evening. When Sarah protested that he didn't need to change his routine because of her, he simply replied, "Family takes care of family." The word family echoed in her mind for days. It was a Friday morning, and Sarah was watching from the bedroom window as James played with Leo in the garden. The baby had started crawling the previous week, a milestone she had almost missed because she was resting when it happened. James had run upstairs to get her, almost carrying the ladder downstairs so she wouldn't miss the moment. "Look, Leo's trying to catch the butterfly," James said, pointing to the baby crawling after a yellow butterfly on the lawn. Sarah smiled, but there was an underlying sadness. Being physically limited made her feel as if she was missing precious moments of her son's childhood. "You're overthinking again," James said, appearing at the bedroom door with Leo in his arms. "I can see the gears turning in your head. How do you know I'm overthinking? You make a specific face, furrowing your brow, biting your lip." He approached and sat on the bed beside her. "What is it this time?" Sarah sighed. "I feel like I'm useless. You're doing everything. Taking care of Leo, the house, me, and I'm just existing here." "First," James said, adjusting Leo in his arms, "you're recovering from a serious accident. Second, you're not just existing. You're teaching me how to be a father. You're not Leo's father." The words came out harsher than Sarah intended, and she saw James flinch as if he had been slapped. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean it that way." "No, it's fine." James became serious. "I'm not his biological father, but—" He looked at Leo, who was playing with the buttons on his shirt. "If you'd let me, I'd like to be the father figure he deserves." "James, I know it's a lot to process. I know we only met 2 months ago, but Sarah, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is you two. When I'm at work, I'm eager to come home. Not to the house, but to you two." Leo chose that moment to pull James's hair, eliciting a chuckle from him. "And this little one here," James continued, kissing Leo's head. "He's already completely won my heart. When he smiles at me, when he reaches out for a hug, when he falls asleep on my chest, it's like I finally understand what life is for." Sarah felt her eyes filling with tears. "Do you really feel that?" "I do, and I know it's scary. It is for me, too. I never imagined I could love a child who wasn't biologically mine. But I've discovered that love has nothing to do with genetics. It has to do with choice. And I choose you two every single day." That afternoon, while Leo was napping, Sarah and James sat on the living room sofa, her head resting on his shoulder. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Something I've never told anyone." "Of course. When I was pregnant with Leo, I used to dream about the kind of father I wanted him to have. Someone who would be patient, who would play with him, who would truly be present." She paused. David was never even close to that, not even before he left. And now? Now I see you doing all the things I dreamed of, and it's perfect. But it also scares me because I don't know if I deserve it. James moved slightly away so he could look at her. Why wouldn't you deserve it? Because you failed once. You chose the wrong father for him. And what if I'm deceiving myself again? And what if I'm seeing things that don't exist because I want them to be true? Sarah, you were 23 when you met David. You were alone, vulnerable, and he probably said all the right things at the right time. That doesn't make you a failure as a mother or as a woman. It makes you human. How can you be so sure that we're right for each other? James thought for a moment. Because with you, I feel like the best version of myself. Because when I look at the future, I can't imagine one that doesn't include you two. And because for the first time in my life, forever doesn't scare me, it excites me. That evening, after dinner, something happened that changed everything. Leo was playing on the living room rug when he stumbled and bumped his head on the floor, starting to cry. Instinctively, he crawled not towards Sarah, but towards James, reaching out for him. James picked him up, gently rocking him and whispering words of comfort. In a few minutes, Leo had stopped crying and was smiling again. "He trusts you," Sarah said, watching the scene with a mix of emotion and admiration. "Children are wise," James replied. "They sense when someone truly loves them. And me? Am I wise enough to trust what I'm feeling?" James approached her, still holding Leo. "Only you can decide that. But if you want an opinion, I think you already know the answer. You're just afraid to believe it." Sarah looked at them both, at the man who had become an essential part of her life, and at the son who clearly already considered James a father figure, a family she had never planned, but which seemed perfect. "James," she said, her voice firm for the first time in weeks, "I want to try, really, not as an experiment or something temporary. I want to build something real with you." The smile that lit up his face was like the sunrise. "Are you sure?" "I am. I'm still scared. I'll probably always be a little scared, but I don't want to let fear make decisions for me." James leaned in and kissed her softly, a kiss that was interrupted by Leo pulling both their hair as if he wanted to be part of the moment. They laughed, and Sarah realized that, for the first time in a long time, the future didn't seem frightening. It seemed promising. "So, what do we do now?" she asked. "Now," James said, settling Leo between them on the sofa, "we start our life, for real, all three of us." As they sat there, embraced on the sofa, Leo falling asleep between them, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the feeling of being exactly where she was supposed to be, with the right people, at the right time. Perhaps happy endings weren't just for fairy tales. Perhaps they were for people brave enough to believe they deserved one. 4 months after the accident, the house had transformed into a true home. It was a sunny March morning, and Sarah was watching from the kitchen window as James taught Leo, now 1-year-old, to walk in the garden. "Come on, champ. You can do it," James encouraged, arms open wide. Leo took his first wobbly steps and fell straight into James's lap, who picked him up, cheering. The sound of both their laughter filled Sarah's heart with a joy she never imagined possible. "Daddy and James are proud, aren't they?" she said, approaching. The word daddy had emerged naturally when Leo started calling James Papa. They simply embraced what was happening. "Sarah," James said, pulling her into a hug with Leo in the middle, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "Yesterday I talked to a lawyer about adopting Leo. I want to make official what I already feel, that he is my son." Sarah felt her eyes filling with tears. "James? And there's one more thing. He knelt right there on the grass, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Sarah Davies, will you marry me? Will you let us be a real family?" Leo, as if understanding the importance of the moment, clapped his hands and shouted, "Daddy! Mummy!" "Yes," Sarah replied before he finished asking. "Yes to everything!" When James placed the ring on her finger, she knew that she had finally found her place in the world. 3 months later, they got married in an intimate ceremony in the house's garden, with Leo as a special ring bearer. During their vows, James promised not only to love Sarah, but to be the father Leo deserved. Sarah promised to build with him the family they both always dreamed of. "Family!" Leo shouted when the two kissed, eliciting laughter from everyone present. That night, after putting Leo to sleep, the newlyweds sat on the living room sofa, planning their future. "I can't believe we got here," Sarah said, admiring her ring. "Do you remember the first night I found you? You crying in the rain, without hope? How could I forget? You saved our lives." "No," James said, holding her face. "You saved mine. This house was just a building before you came. Now, it's a home." From Leo's room came a soft murmur, him talking to himself before falling asleep, as he did every night. It was the sound of a secure and loved child. "He'll never remember how it was before," Sarah observed. "And that's okay. For him, we've always been a family. And about your dreams, the shop you always wanted to have?" James smiled. "I've already set aside a perfect space in the new project. Your shop will be a reality." As they embraced, listening to the soft sounds of the house, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them there. From a desperate woman, without prospects, to a fulfilled wife and mother. From a lonely man to a passionate father and husband. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. Forever." "Forever," she agreed. And this time there was no fear in the word, just certainty. 6 months later, when Leo turned 2, he gained a baby sister. The family that began by chance had become the greatest blessing of their lives, and they lived happily ever after. Not because they had no more challenges, but because they learned that true love faces any storm when the right people are by your side. Your interactions are very important to us. Leave your name in the comments, and we can include it in one of our stories with a special shout-out just for you.